It was late in the afternoon, and the rain had been falling steadily for hours, turning the train station into a gray sea of reflections and rippling puddles that shimmered under the dim lights overhead, while passengers hurried across the slick concrete platform, their umbrellas bending under the gusts of cold wind and their footsteps echoing like a restless drumbeat. Yet in the middle of this storm of motion, one young woman stood quietly, her blonde hair damp despite her effort to shield it. Her simple white blouse clinging lightly from the drizzle, her gray skirt brushing against her legs, and her black heels clicking softly as she walked with a pace both tired and determined, because life had not been kind to her lately. Her name was Emily, and though she carried herself with dignity, inside she was weighed down by worry, for she had recently lost her part-time job at the cafe that had been just enough to cover rent and food, and with bills waiting at home and no family nearby to lean on, she felt the crushing silence of loneliness press harder every day, leaving her with only one crisp $10 bill folded inside her worn-out wallet, the very last piece of money she possessed until her next chance at work, and though $10 was not much, to her it meant survival, a meal to quiet her stomach before another long, sleepless night of anxiety, a small shield against the hunger that threatened to remind her just how fragile her situation had become. But even as she thought about her own hunger, about the gnawing emptiness that waited for her after the train ride, her eyes caught sight of something that made her stop, something that most people had noticed and dismissed, or perhaps noticed and intentionally ignored, for there at the far end of the platform, half sitting and half slouched against a blue-painted pillar, was a man who seemed entirely defeated by life itself. His jeans were torn at the knees and soaked with rainwater, his brown hair clung to his forehead, his t-shirt was stretched thin and damp, and his hands rested limply in his lap as though holding them up took more strength than he could muster, and though his body was present, his spirit seemed far away, as if he had drifted into a place where time no longer mattered. The other commuters rushed by him with quickened steps, some pulling their coats tighter, others shaking their heads slightly as if to say, another beggar, another soul too far gone to matter, but Emily could not simply look away, because in his silence, in the hollow way his eyes stared at the ground, she saw not a stranger but a mirror of her own fears, the possibility that one day her life might crumble in the same way if fortune did not change. She hesitated, her heart pounding, and then her fingers slipped into her purse, touching the edge of that lone $10 bill, feeling its thin paper against her skin, knowing that if she gave it away she would have nothing, no food to eat tonight, no safety net at all, yet also knowing that if she walked past without helping, she would carry the weight of regret heavier than hunger itself. For a moment, she argued with herself, I need this more than he does. No, maybe he has nothing at all, it's just $10, but to me it's everything, and to him maybe it's even more, until finally she took a deep breath, pulled out the bill, and slowly walked toward him, her heels splashing through a puddle that sent rings of water spreading across the platform. The man looked up when he saw her approaching, and his eyes, deep brown and rimmed with exhaustion, flickered with confusion, as though he did not expect anyone to stop, much less someone like her, cleanly dressed and clearly carrying her own burdens. She bent down slightly, her voice soft but steady as she extended the folded bill toward him, and she said, Here, maybe this can help, even just a little. For a moment, he didn't move, his gaze fixed on her hand, on the $10 bill that seemed both impossibly small and unimaginably huge, because when you have nothing, even the smallest gift feels like a fortune. Slowly, almost hesitantly, he reached out, his fingers trembling as he touched the money, his voice raspy as he whispered, You don't have to. She shook her head gently, offering the faintest smile despite the storm inside her heart, and replied, I know. But sometimes, we all need a little kindness. And in that moment, as the announcement of an incoming train boomed through the station speakers and passengers hurried even faster to catch their rides, the two of them remained suspended in a quiet exchange, as though the rain, the crowd, and the noise had all been muted, leaving only the fragile connection between a woman with nothing to spare and a man with nothing at all. He smiled then, not a wide or easy smile, but one filled with something deeper, gratitude, relief, and perhaps even hope, while she rose to her feet, adjusted her purse on her shoulder, and walked toward her train without looking back, her shoes echoing against the wet tiles until the sound blended with the rush of boarding passengers. She did not see him continue to stare after her, did not see the way his eyes followed her until she vanished inside the train car, and she certainly did not know that the man she had just given her last $10 to was not who he seemed at all. For beneath the ragged clothes and weary posture was a story hidden from the world, a truth that would one day astonish her and everyone who heard it. He was no ordinary stranger, he was a millionaire in disguise, testing the humanity he had long lost faith in. As the train doors closed behind her and the carriage jolted forward, Emily sank into her seat, her clothes slightly damp from the rain, her purse feeling lighter than ever before, because she knew that she had just given away her last $10, and though a part of her whispered that she might regret it later when her stomach growled from hunger, another part of her, the stronger part, whispered that she had done the right thing, that she had chosen compassion over fear, humanity over self-preservation, and in that choice she felt a quiet kind of pride that money could never buy, but she did not know that the men she left behind remained frozen on the wet platform, staring at the bill in his hand, his mind racing, because though to the world he looked like just another broken soul abandoned by luck, in truth he was someone very different, someone whose life had once been the opposite of hers, filled with luxury, wealth, and every comfort imaginable, for his name was Daniel, and he was a self-made millionaire who had spent years building businesses, climbing ladders, and surrounding himself with riches, yet somewhere along the way he had lost faith in people, lost trust in kindness, and had come to believe that the world was cold, selfish, and indifferent, until one day he decided to disappear from it all, disguising himself as a man with nothing to see how the world truly treated those at the bottom, and what he found broke his heart. Day after day, people walked past him without a glance, or worse, with disgust, and he had begun to wonder if kindness was a myth, if compassion was extinct, until that moment when Emily's hand extended toward him, carrying not just a bill but a message, that humanity was still alive, even in the heart of someone who had nothing left to give. The rain fell harder, soaking him to the bone, but Daniel no longer felt the chill. Instead, he felt a spark ignite inside him, a reminder of the boy he once was before wealth hardened him, a boy who believed that people were good, that kindness mattered, and as he held the $10 bill in his hand, he realized that this woman had given him far more than money. She had given him hope. He rose slowly, his legs stiff from sitting too long in the cold, and began to walk, not toward a shelter or a place to hide, but toward his car parked discreetly at the far end of the station, a sleek vehicle no one would ever imagine belonged to a man in rags, and as he sat inside, drying his hair with a towel he had hidden in the back seat, he thought of Emily, of her tired smile, of the way she hadn't hesitated once she made her choice, and he whispered to himself, she doesn't know it yet. But she just changed everything. Meanwhile, Emily rode the train home, the rhythmic clatter of the tracks lulling her into a haze of worry and reflection, because though she tried to stay strong, doubts crept into her mind. What if I can't pay rent? What if tomorrow brings nothing better? Why did I give away what little I had? But then she remembered the look in the man's eyes, the way his voice trembled, and she reminded herself that kindness was never wasted, even if it didn't come back to her immediately. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window, watching the blurred landscape rush by, and thought, maybe, just maybe, I've started something I can't yet see. And she was right, because far behind her, Daniel had already made up his mind. He would find her again, not to repay her $10, but to show her that the universe always remembers acts of selflessness, that a single moment of compassion could ripple outward into a story larger than either of them could imagine. The night deepened, and Emily finally returned to her small apartment, the leaky faucet dripping in the kitchen, the fridge nearly empty, and she sat at her table, her stomach growling but her heart strangely light, for though she had nothing to eat, she felt richer in spirit than she had in weeks, telling herself quietly that tomorrow would bring something new, that life had a way of turning when you least expected it. And in another part of the city, Daniel changed out of his disguise, showered, and stood before a mirror, staring at his own reflection as if seeing himself for the first time in years, realizing that his wealth meant nothing without people like Emily in the world to remind him of humanity, and he vowed then and there that he would not let her kindness go unanswered. He would find her, learn her story, and when the time was right, reveal to her who he truly was. For now, though, he held onto her face in his memory, her words echoing in his ears, sometimes we all need a little kindness. And with that vow, the seeds of a story were planted, a story of generosity, of fate, and of two strangers whose lives would soon intertwine in ways they could never have foreseen. And so chapter 1 closes not with an ending but with a promise. A young woman who gave away her last $10 walks unknowingly toward the hardest week of her life, and a millionaire disguised as a beggar prepares to rewrite not only his own beliefs but hers as well, setting the stage for a revelation that would leave the world stunned, because what started as a small act of kindness on a rainy train platform was about to become a tale of destiny.